This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
US and Russian diplomats hold crunch talks amid rising tensions over Ukraine. Mali fights back with its own sanctions after ECOWAS severs ties over election delays. And 10 people killed in floods in South Africa as hundreds more are rendered homeless. Welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. We'll bring you the details on those stories in just a moment, but first, here's Rama Nyang with the day's business headlines. Rama.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. South Africa's new car sales have gone up by 22% in 2021, but they're still far off pre-pandemic levels. And Egypt's Suez Canal revenues have hit an all-time record in 2021, despite the effect of the pandemic on the shipping industry. We'll have the details on those stories and lots more coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, let's start with the latest in current affairs.
Rama, thank you. And we begin the hour in Geneva, where Russia and the US have been holding talks aimed at easing tensions over Ukraine. US Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman has described the discussions as frank and forthright. Her Russian counterpart Sergei Ryabkov says the talks were complex and very professional, adding that the US heard Russia's concerns, which include fears of NATO's potential expansion into Eastern Europe via Ukraine. Earlier, NATO Chief Jens Stoltenberg held a meeting with Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister over tensions to the east of the country and with Russia.
These are important efforts to try to make sure that we have a political solution, that we prevent an armed conflict, and therefore we are going into these talks in good faith, ready to address substance, and of course ready to listen to Russia's concerns. I have negotiated with Russia before as a Norwegian Prime Minister, and I know it's possible to make deals with Russia.
The most principled position for Ukraine is that we have inherent sovereign right to choose our own security arrangements, including treaties and alliances. The Euro-Atlantic integration is enshrined in our constitution and supported by the majority of Ukrainian citizens. It's not a subject to negotiation or bargaining chip.
And in news making the headlines on the continent, authorities in Mali have condemned the economic sanctions imposed by ECOWAS. The regional bloc imposed the sweeping measures after Malian leaders announced the delay of elections from next month to December 2025. On Monday, Mali reacted to the tough sanctions by recalling its ambassadors and closing its borders with West African nations. Authorities in Mali have reassured their citizens that measures have been taken to ensure normal supplies to the country.
Dans les heures à venir, le gouvernement du Mali prendra toutes les mesures nécessaires.
In the coming hours, the government of Mali will take all the necessary measures to respond to these unfortunate sanctions. The government of Mali deplores all the inhumane nature of these measures, which affects a population already hard hit by security crisis and the health crisis, particularly that of the COVID-19. The government of Mali invites the population to remain calm and to show restraint. In the event of any possible deployment of foreign forces against our country, the government of Mali also calls on the defense and security forces, as well as the population, to increase their vigilance and remain mobilized. The government of Mali appeals to the solidarity and support of people and countries and institutions.
Earlier on Sunday, ECOWAS leaders meeting in Accra, Ghana, imposed wide-ranging sanctions on Mali. The leaders said an attempt by Mali's military rulers to delay elections until 2025 was unacceptable. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai is following those developments from Accra.
The West African leaders met in Accra to discuss the political situation in Mali. They are concerned about the failure of the transitional authority in Mali to hold elections in February. Mali's transitional government has proposed to return the country to civilian rule within the next 5 years.
The authority find the proposed chronogram for a transition totally unacceptable. This chronogram simply means that an illegitimate military transition government will take the Malian people hostage during the next 5 years.
ECOWAS has upheld the already imposed sanctions on Mali and its transitional government, which include a freeze of financial assets and a travel ban. The regional bloc had already suspended Mali after the military took over the government more than a year ago and has now imposed further sanctions.
These additional sanctions include: first, the withdrawal of ambassadors of all ECOWAS member states in Mali. Second, closure of land and air border between ECOWAS member countries and Mali. Third, suspension of all commercial and financial transactions between ECOWAS member states and Mali.
ECOWAS has also frozen Mali's assets in the regional bloc's central commercial banks and suspended all financial support given to the country. The West African leaders say they are also concerned about the deployment of private security agents in Mali, although the transition government has denied it. They believe it has contributed to the delay in the political transition to civilian rule in the country. ECOWAS has urged the international community, including the African Union and United Nations, to support the implementation of the sanctions. The regional bloc says it will only lift the sanctions after it agrees on a timeline with Mali's transitional authority to return the country to a civilian government. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
Earlier, I spoke to Ibrahim Al-Bakri Nye. He's a researcher in African political economy and a fellow at the Center for Democracy and Development, West Africa. I started by asking him about the impact of the sanctions imposed by ECOWAS.
Well, first, the sanctions will seek to delegitimize the military government and incite the Malian population against the military government. And the sanction will hamstring the Malian military government to exert the authority that it thought they would have had to impose themselves on the Malian people. And certainly, the sanction will severely impact the Malian economy, given the restrictions on the movement of goods and people and financial inflows and outflows to the country. But it's obviously going to be difficult to implement at the multiple porous borders that Mali has with its neighbor. The official borders will be closed, certainly, but it's only going to facilitate the smuggling of goods and the trafficking of goods into and out of Mali and the trafficking of persons. And we also risk smuggling of arms into Mali, particularly to the non-state armed groups that are operating in the northern territories of Mali, and further weakening the military authority, which is already not fighting the insurgency, will strengthen the position of the armed groups to expand their territory. At the moment, the Malian political leadership or the military leadership controls less than half of the country's territory. And the deepening of sanctions and restrictions against Mali is only going to strengthen the insurgents in the northern territories, the northern and central territories of Mali.
The United Nations says it will launch talks to help Sudan resolve its escalating political crisis. The initiative comes ahead of a scheduled meeting by the UN Security Council on Wednesday to discuss the Northeast African country. During a press conference, the head of the UN's Transitional Mission for Sudan, Volker Perth, said the UN facilitated talks aimed to support the Sudanese to reach an agreement that will help the country resume its roadmap to democratic transition and peace. The UN's move was welcomed by the US, the UK and the UAE, Saudi Arabia and Egypt. The UN envoy says there has been no objection from the military institutions.
It is important for me to confirm that the United Nations did not come up with any project, draft or vision for a solution, and we did not even come up with a proposal for the main disputed files. We will not adopt a project for any side. These are all Sudanese matters. Sudanese men and women should agree. We offered a process of consultations, but we did not present a prior project.
Meanwhile, Sudanese groups protested in front of the headquarters of the United Nations Special Mission in Khartoum. Many are against foreign interference in Sudanese issues and rejected the dialogue launched by the UN mission.
Any attempts by any party must be through our portals and not from a foreign or external party to take over an initiative. Because when there is a difference, the main decision will be driven from the United Nations organizations or other international organizations. So how do we accept to put ourselves in this trap? We will not accept foreign initiatives. It must be Sudanese.
We value this issue, but on condition that no one is excluded, that all Sudanese actors are present. We say that the Sudanese people are able to solve all their problems. We believe that it is okay for there to be international sponsorship, but without interfering in the decisions and results of this dialogue.
Well, let's bring in Naba Mohideen to update us on the latest developments in Khartoum. Naba, the UN says it will launch talks to help Sudan resolve its escalating political crisis. Tell us more about that plan and which groups will take part in the talks.
Actually, yes, the UN said it has an initiative to contain the political crisis by setting a dialogue between political counterparts, the military, the political powers, resistance committees, and women unions and youth unions also. The roadmap is to make people sit in a round table and to offer and make concessions that it's really needed in this situation and this political deadlock. But in the same time, United Nations said they don't have a project for that. They didn't set a roadmap telling that what the counterparts should do, rather than a censorship or just assistance for Sudanese people aspirations and any plan that the political powers can offer and share. So it was responding to some accusations saying that United Nations is interfering in the political scene in Sudan. The United Nations said they are only offering an assistance and consultation for the political powers and for the military and for different bodies and entities, and they are prioritizing Sudanese people aspirations and demands.
Well, Naba, how is this announcement though being received in Khartoum?
There is different reactions in the capital. The Sovereign Council has welcomed the initiative, and the military generals welcomed it and said it may be a roadmap for the political deadlock, but the political parties and opposition, the Freedom and Change Alliance, they rejected it, and also the professional unions, which is a Sudanese Professional Association that backed the protest against the ousted leader Omar al-Bashir, and the protest organizers rejected any initiative by United Nations because they said any political deadlock or crisis is a domestic issue. They don't want any mentorship or censorship or guardianship by the international community. And they think also it's fundamentally against what they want, which is against negotiation or making any partnership with the military. There is mixed and different reactions towards the initiative, but there is some sources told us that within 2 days some political parties will sign and join this initiative and make a roadmap with the United Nations. Some sources said 90% of a new political pact is ready and waiting for some other parties confirmation to join it. So we may see some big parties like Umma Party in the scene again with the United Nations and military generals.
All right, Naba Mohideen joining us there from Khartoum. Thank you. Now, several key Somali political leaders have reached a new deal to conclude parliamentary polls before the 25th of February. This follows a week-long meeting in Mogadishu. However, some political analysts have warned that the new deal still has some shortcomings. Mohamed Kahiye reports from the Somali capital, Mogadishu.
Somali Prime Minister Mohamed Hussein Roble and 5 regional state leaders have finally agreed to speed up the already delayed polls in the country following week-long crucial discussions. The Somali armed forces have also been urged to remain neutral while performing their national duties of maintaining law and order during the crucial electoral calendar.
In order to safeguard the close coordination of the electoral body, the National Consultative Council calls upon various levels of the poll management agency to respect the rules and regulations as per the existing electoral agreements. Likewise, the Council reiterates respect for the 30% women quota in the ongoing process.
People living in the capital Mogadishu, who witnessed the clashes related to poll differences in the past months, have welcomed the move.
The new agreement reached is great because it brings together both the leadership and the Somali people, and we pray for its successive implementation.
Analysts believe the new agreement is a step forward in the right direction, but they warn that there are still many challenges ahead.
The deal is generally welcome, but it will face three main challenges, including the timeline set to conclude the parliamentary polls within 45 days. Secondly, there is that issue of the Dispute Resolution Committee, where the difference between the President and Prime Minister started. And thirdly, the agreement does not make it clear who will select the tribal leaders, which will result in conflict later.
Somali international partners have welcomed the consensus reached by its leaders, stressing the need to implement the decisions in order to conduct credible polls. Hamid Kahir, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Well, let's return to our headline story this hour. Russia and the US have been holding talks aimed at easing tensions over Ukraine. For more on this, I'm joined by Julia Lyubova. She's joining us from Geneva. Julia, talks between the US and Russia have been ongoing now. What updates do you have?
Well, that's right. So on Monday, there have been talks in Geneva between Russia and the United States, and they've been held in the building behind me, the US mission to the United Nations. And those talks have concluded now. And actually, we've been hearing from both sides, from Russia and from the United States. We've been hearing from the head of the Russian delegation, who is the Russian Deputy Foreign Minister, Sergei Ryabkov. He said that those talks were difficult, long, but professional and concrete. And it seems that what we've been hearing from both sides is that no final decision has been made on Monday. Both sides, they said that they will be waiting for another meeting on Tuesday. That would be a very critical meeting for the two sides. Of course, that's a meeting in Brussels between NATO and Russia. And then also that will be followed by a meeting between with the OSCE, Organization for Security and Cooperation of Europe, and now it will be held in Vienna. So this is today's talks. They were part of the series of talks going on the whole week. And of course, those talks, they're all addressing the security situation in Europe right now, because right now, Russia has deployed thousands of its troops near the border with Ukraine, and the United States and Kiev, they say that this is preparation for an invasion. Russia denies any plans for invasion. And this is what also Russia's head of the Russian delegation said following the talks. He said that Russia has no plans for invading Ukraine. But both sides, they said that they need to continue talking, that Monday's talks were very useful to hear each other's points of view. But of course, they're very different, because Russia's demands is that NATO doesn't expand further into Ukraine. And of course, well, the US head of the US delegation said that one country cannot change the borders of another country by force. So indeed, very deep differences remain between the two sides, but it sounds like they will be holding more dialogues later in this week, and possibly there will be some kind of a decision to de-escalate the situation in Europe made by the end of this week. But we'll have to see if this actually happens.
Indeed, Julia Lyubova joining us there from Geneva. Thank you. You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. 10 people killed in floods in South Africa as hundreds more are rendered homeless. And schools reopen in Uganda after nearly 2 years due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In South Africa, floods have ravaged the eastern coastal city of East London. At least 10 people have been killed and hundreds left homeless since the weekend. This as torrents of water washed away homes. Heavy rains caused rivers in the region to burst their banks, leaving roads submerged in water. Scientists suspect that climate change is the cause of worsening floods and droughts along South Africa's eastern coastline.
We are happy to report that since this recent incident, we have intervened by dispatching by giving out food parcels to the affected communities, giving temporary shelters to people who lost everything, including those who lost their loved ones during this disaster.
The Africa CDC says the continent has recorded over 10 million COVID-19 cases, with the death toll currently standing at more than 230,000. South Africa, Morocco, Tunisia, Ethiopia and Libya are recording the most cases in Africa. The Africa CDC says about 9.6% of the continent's population is fully vaccinated. The health body estimates African countries have so far received about 547 million COVID-19 vaccine doses. While in Uganda, schools have reopened after being shut down for close to 2 years due to the coronavirus pandemic. It's been one of the longest school closures globally, according to UNICEF. But as Isabel Nakiria tells us from Kampala, the reopening of the learning institutions comes as the country is struggling to deal with the third wave of COVID-19.
The classroom is open again for learning in Uganda. Children attending public schools in the capital Kampala were upbeat about their first day back in class after being stuck at home for close to 80 weeks.
I am happy to be back at school because, first of all, at home, you'll be there just sitting, doing nothing.
The time we have spent at home, it is so long. I have been missing school because I'm not learning.
However, Uganda is in a grip of a third wave of COVID-19, so there are concerns about the safety of children as they return to schools. This is one of the oldest public schools in Kampala, and authorities here say they are overwhelmed by the huge number of students in attendance. There is fear that in case of an outbreak, controlling it will be hard. Authorities say they've tried to put in place strict COVID protocol measures, and they will do all that's needed to manage the situation.
With the young ones, of course, the distancing is not, it might not be possible because of the big numbers in these classes, but we are insisting that these children should put on masks and wear them well, washing their hands every now and then, because we have sinks in these classes, soap is everywhere in all corners.
The government has moved all students to a higher learning grade to catch up with lost time. Many students attending private schools have been attending online lessons when learning institutions remained closed. But for many of those in public schools, they'll have to read and grasp a backlog of 2 years' worth of study material within a short time.
Before, my child was in primary 3 before, but he will stay in that class because I have not had time to follow up his classwork.
Teachers throughout the country have been going through basic training in detection and care of COVID-19 cases. The government says it has picked up lessons from previous wave of COVID infections and has pledged that schools will remain clean and safe. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN Kampala, Uganda.
And for a deeper look at the impact of the closure of schools in Uganda, we spoke to Munir Safieldin. He is the UNICEF country representative in Uganda. Let's take a closer look.
The closure of the schools affected about 15 million learners in many ways. One example is that these 15 million learners lost every month about 2.9 billion hours of learning. So if we take the last 15 months for which the schools were supposed to be operating, the 15 million learners in Uganda lost about 43.5 billion hours of learning. It will take a lot of time to compensate for this loss of learning. Secondly, we also have seen that in the absence of schools as safe spaces, about 3,000 teenage girls experienced pregnancies in Uganda during the pandemic. We also know that from the projections from the National Planning Authority that about 30% of the students who were in schools before the school closure are not likely to come back to school because many of them are either engaged in early marriage or child labor or other form of business that would not allow them to come back to school again. And we also know that from the same projections of the National Planning Authority, around 4,000 primary and secondary private schools are not likely to reopen again. And a number of very good measures have been put in place by the Ministry of Education and other partners like the Ministry of Health. The most important thing is that schools are reopening at a time where globally we are experiencing an increase in the cases of COVID infections. Uganda is also experiencing increase. But that is not a reason to keep schools closed. So the reopening of schools has been done with a lot of emphasis on school-based surveillance of the COVID cases. So teachers and head teachers and a number of other staff in schools have been trained on how to prevent COVID infections in the schools, how to detect infections, and how to isolate any case of suspected COVID infection within the school and to report to the health authorities to come and follow up on that. So this is a very good measure that has been taken and is already in place. The government provided funding for the schools to be able to purchase the required supplies for sanitation, for hand washing, and disinfection. This is also very good news.
A fire that burnt South Africa's Houses of Parliament in Cape Town for 3 days last week has caused damages to the tune of millions of dollars. That's according to South Africa's Heritage Resources Agency. This comes as many South Africans struggle to come to terms with the fact that Parliament's iconic old and new assembly buildings have been gutted in the alleged arson attack. Renee Delcam has more.
The 2nd of January 2022 will go down in history as the day South Africans awoke to the news that their parliament was on fire.
It's a tragic thing to see the National Assembly of this country up in flames.
What a start to the new year for Parliament, for the people of Cape Town, for the people of South Africa.
It really is devastating.
This is a historic building. It is the National Assembly of South Africa, and it's just so shocking.
The inferno swept through the halls of the old and new assembly buildings, and firefighters battled for over 70 hours before it was extinguished.
We can confirm that one of the biggest losses that the people of South Africa have suffered in this fire is the complete burning down of the National Assembly chamber, a seat of crucial plenary settings of the National Assembly, and joint sittings of the two houses, the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces.
An assessment report by the City of Cape Town's Fire and Rescue Services has revealed several flaws in the parliamentary fire safety system. Fire doors, which were designed to slow down the spread of fires, had been held open with cheap metal latches, rendering them useless. And the servicing of fire sprinklers, which had apparently not worked properly when the fire broke out, was long overdue.
The report is a useful insight into what the firefighters saw on the ground, but of course it does not substitute or replace a full professional forensic investigation into the causes of the fire and whether any systems failures exacerbated the spread of the fire.
Experts say the extensive damage caused by the fire has eroded the intangible value and significance of South Africa's parliamentary precinct.
It's a significant loss in terms of the financial value. This is public infrastructure that belongs to all South Africans. It's going to cost hundreds of millions to repair this. But in terms of restoring it and finding that historical material, such as the woodwork, which might have been imported in the 1800s, the buildings, which are also historical buildings designed by Herbert Baker, and other famous architects have been very much destroyed, and it's going to be a monumental task to get them back to a functional condition.
As parliamentary, forensic and other experts continue counting the cost of the January 2nd fire, the man accused of setting Parliament alight is due back in court this week. Renad Al-Kam, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
Tanzania continues to deal with the challenge of undocumented immigrants. Official figures show that over 15,000 illegal immigrants from countries in the Horn of Africa were arrested between 2020 and 2021. CGTN's Isaac Lukando has more.
Tanzania has been battling with a problem of illegal immigration for decades. While the number has gone down from a high of 20,000 migrants every year a decade ago, the problem still persists. Ethiopian and Somali immigrants in their thousands enter Tanzania heading southwards in search of better lives. The International Organization for Migration says individuals often pay up to $3,000 to be smuggled to countries in southern Africa. Despite government efforts here, there appears to be no end in sight to the problem. Just last week, 51 Ethiopian immigrants were arrested in the capital Dodoma while en route to South Africa. The country's head of immigration says they will continue to carry out operations to apprehend illegal immigrants. Other avenues are also being pursued. Early last year, some 1,700 illegal immigrants from Ethiopia were released from Tanzanian prisons as a goodwill gesture. But analysts argue that a lasting solution to the problem can only be found with better conditions in the immigrants' home countries. Isaac Lukando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Well, let's now go to Rama Nyang for a look at the day's business news. Rama.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. This is what's coming up in business. South Africa's new car sales go up by 22% in 2021, but they're still way off pre-pandemic levels. And Suez Canal revenues have hit an all-time record in 2021, despite the damage inflicted on the shipping industry by the pandemic.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's start in South Africa. New vehicle sales over there rebounded relatively strongly in the domestic market in 2021, going up by 22% to more than 464,000 units for the year. That's according to data released by the Automotive Business Council. Now that, remember, does come in the wake of a 29% drop in 2020, in a year where sales were heavily affected by the outbreak of the pandemic. The automobile body says that 2021 new vehicle sales were assisted by renewed activity in vehicle rentals in the second half of the year, especially as the tourism sector started to show signs of recovery. It, however, notes that the market conditions in the new passenger car and light commercial vehicle segments does continue to be characterized by a buying down trend, with pre-owned vehicles offering the most enticing option during the year. Sales of medium and heavy commercial vehicles also recovered in 2021, with truck and van sales mirroring an improved macroeconomic climate. Up north, Libya's oil exports were already sharply curtailed following a blockade by paramilitaries in the west, but they're set to fall even further after bad weather shut down ports in the east. Now, at least 4 terminals were shut on Saturday. They're likely to remain closed until early next week. It's yet another setback for this OPEC member, whose production is now under 1 million barrels a day. Libya back in late December suspended crude exports from its western Zawiya and Melita ports after militias halted the country's largest oil field from producing any oil. Daily crude exports in the first week of this year were 45% below the December average, according to data compiled by Bloomberg. Libya is now pumping roughly 900,000 barrels a day of crude, roughly 350,000 a day less than a month ago, even after repairs are completed on a major pipeline in the east. Now, on to East Africa. Tea prices at the Mombasa auction sold at an average of $2.45 a kilogram in the first sale of 2022 as they rallied to a 6-year high, raising hopes of fairly decent earnings for farmers in the current financial year. According to the East African Tea Traders Association, the total volume traded in the first day of auction was close to 450,000 kilos more than in the last day of 2021. Tea prices in Kenya have been rising since November on the back of a minimum reserve price regime introduced by the government. In July, the Kenya Tea Development Authority introduced a minimum reserve price of $2.43 a kilo of processed tea in a move that was aimed at cushioning smallholder farmers who were affected by the deteriorating markets that have seen selling prices nearly below the cost of production. Back up north now, the Suez Canal has posted its highest ever annual revenue at $6.3 billion, up from $5.6 billion a year earlier, effectively exceeding pre-pandemic levels. Now, what makes this a special feat is that it comes in spite of the challenges of 2021, including the blockage of the passage by the Ever Given, you remember that particular vessel, back in March. Here's Yasser Kim with the details.
The $6.3 billion revenue is not the only record set by the Suez Canal, but 2021 also saw the largest cargo volume passing through the canal at 1.27 million tons, 10% more than 2019. It makes the canal a major contributor of hard currency for the Egyptian economy, especially with the drop in income from the all-important tourism sector. The Suez Canal record revenues for 2021 have come amidst a lot of challenges. You've got the coronavirus pandemic extending for another year, as well as the Evergreen saga, which has threatened to dent the reputation of the Suez Canal. In mid-March, the 400-meter-long container vessel, weighing 224,000 tons, stuck on sideways of the canal for a week, blocking ships from crossing and causing huge disruption in international trade.
We faced several challenges, each more difficult than the other, but thank God we succeeded in them. The first challenge is the grounding of the Evergreen, and we managed to safely take it out. Then there were 422 vessels waiting for 6 days during the grounding. We had to help them cross the corridor quickly because they were delayed with people's goods and a lot was at stake. We managed to let them through in 4 days. That's 100 ships per day. And this was a record because we used to allow a maximum of 70 vessels to cross the canal daily. So this was another success.
And indeed, the standoff didn't affect trade through the canal, and traffic continued at higher rates after the incident. Authorities also went ahead with developing the waterway after the saga.
A development project of the canal, ordered by President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, is meant to increase the depth and the width of the southern corridor where the Evergreen vessel went to ground. This is to avoid a repeat of this incident.
Going forward, the Central Authority has increased prices by 6% in 2022 to cover rising running costs. However, several incentives have been offered, such as waiving fees on tourism ships to support the global tourism industry, which was seriously affected by the coronavirus pandemic, and 15 to 20% discounts to eco-friendly vessels to support green energy shipping.
With the new Suez Canal development project, as well as raising shipping fees and a new incentives-based marketing strategy applied by the Canal Authority, I believe there will be higher revenues in the next period.
The Suez Canal has also got a boost, as a competitive Israeli-Emirati oil route expected to attract a significant share of traffic from the Suez Canal was suspended by an Israeli court late December, making the outlook for 2022 and beyond even more positive. Yas Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Let's move on to global economic prospects amid a rising surge of COVID-19 cases. The International Monetary Fund is warning that emerging economies must brace themselves for possible rough times ahead, as tighter monetary policies enacted by the US Federal Reserve could essentially trigger capital outflows and currency depreciation. According to a blog on the IMF's website, emerging economies must tailor their response based on their specific circumstances and vulnerabilities. Now, central banks that are increasing interest rates in order to fight inflation also do need to help their citizens understand why price stability is so important. The IMF is due to release fresh global economic forecasts on the 25th of January, and it says that the current global economic recovery from the ravages of the pandemic will continue this year and the next. One last story for you in this segment. China has vowed to prioritize its efforts to stabilize growth as the economy is at a critical point. That's according to a State Council executive meeting chaired by the Premier Li Keqiang. Now, that meeting says that the government will not adopt an ultra-loose monetary policy, while at the same time pledging to boost domestic demand with effective consumption and investment. In the meantime, the State Council will press ahead with major projects outlined in the country's 14th five-year plan that covers 2021 through to 2025. It also says that the government will normalise collective procurement of medicines and other high-value medical supplies as part of broader efforts to cut the financial burden that patients are facing. I'll leave you there for the time being, but I'll be back at the top of the hour. In global business, we'll be looking at East Africa. Leaders from the region are looking to fast-track the adoption of the AAC pass in order to make cross-border movement a lot easier and to end these persistent traffic snarl-ups we're seeing that are disrupting trade amid differences on how to handle COVID. But how exactly will this system really work? We'll be live in Kigali to explore that and plenty more at the top of the hour. See you then. For now, back to Beatrice.
Rama, thank you. Well, we still have more news coming up here on the program. Your sports news coming up. Take a look. Last gasp, Sadio Mane penalty hand Senegal victory over Zimbabwe in a Group B AFCON clash.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
And we kick off in Cameroon, where Senegal's Sadio Mane converted a penalty 7 minutes into stoppage time to hand the pre-tournament favourites a 1-0 victory over Zimbabwe at the start of their Africa Cup of Nations campaign in Bafoussam on Monday. Zimbabwe's defender Kelvin Madzongwe was penalised for blocking a shot with his hand extended away from his body in the area in a heartbreaking turn of events for his side as they were on the cusp of an upset result at the start of Group B action. Senegal are Africa's top-ranked team but had only 18 players available for their opening match group because of the novel coronavirus and injury. The favourites produced a tepid performance despite a Lions' share of possession. Chelsea goalkeeper Edward Mendy and Napoli defender Kalidou Koulibaly, who is the captain of the Lions of Teranga, were the latest to be forced to miss the clash after testing positive for coronavirus. And still in Cameroon, let's meet Henry Muyebe, the official mascot of the country's national football team, the Indomitable Lions. A resident of Douala, Henry and his team are preparing to chair the AFCON 2021 hosts to what they hope will be a 6th continental title on home soil. CGTN's Nokutula Shabalala reports.
With his full catalogue of traditional songs, dance and the rhythm of a tambourine, Henry Muyebe is ready to cheer the Indomitable Lions of Cameroon to victory. Better known as Ngado Piquet in his country, Muyebe promises to keep the show going until the end of the competition on the 6th of February.
We are preparing very well for the AFCON. You know, we have always supported our Lions. We are ready for the match against Burkina Faso. For this match, we are preparing something big in terms of spectacle, something that people have never seen. It is a big surprise that we have in store for everyone, and we'll see that in the opening match against the Stallions of Burkina Faso.
Muyebe has supported the Indomitable Lions of Cameroon in the last 18 editions of the African Cup of Nations, all outside Cameroon. For him and his team, the 2021 AFCON, which is being played at home this year, has special meaning.
This Africa Cup of Nations means a lot to me. After 18 AFCON outside our borders, today I will support our lions by staying in my country. This is the first time this has happened, and I can say that the 2021 AFCON is already a success for me and even for the Cameroonian people.
I've been with Ngando Piquet for several years to perform at Cameroon matches. I was a bit discouraged at one point, but since the AFCON is being played at home this time, I decided to stay with Ngando Piquet to support Cameroon because I really love my country.
A few hours before the opening match, Moyebe was optimistic of victory. And the indomitable Lions did not disappoint, despite being forced to come from a goal down to win their Group A opener against Burkina Faso 2-1.
I have never been a pessimist in my life. I am sure we will win this competition. We have won all our 5 continental trophies abroad. Now we are hosting the AFCON and we have to win it to make all the people happy.
Moyebe began his career as a mascot for Cameroon's national teams in the 1990s. For almost 20 years now, some 15 young people have joined him in his adventure, adding pomp, flair and color to the indomitable Lions matches. Noktula Shabalala, CGTN.
Elsewhere, a former Mali international Ousmane Coulibaly was in a stable condition in hospital after suffering a heart attack on the pitch during a Qatar Stars League match on Saturday, his wife has said. The 32-year-old fullback collapsed in a goal-mouth scramble near the end of the first half of Al Wakra's match against Al Rayyan at Doha's Al Gharafa Stadium and was treated by medical and ambulance staff on the pitch. Coulibaly was born in Paris and played for French clubs Guingamp and Brest before spells with Platania and Panathinaikos in the Greek Super League. He joined Al Wakra in 2019. The match, which was abandoned with Al Rayyan winning 1-0, was set to be completed later on Monday at a different stadium. Egypt and Liverpool star Mohamed Salah has made it to the final shortlist of the Best FIFA Awards 2021 alongside Lionel Messi and Robert Lewandowski after another sensational year. This is the second time the Egyptian star has made it to the coveted shortlist, but does he stand the chance of taking home the prize this time? CGTN's Adil Mahroui brings us more.
Once again, Mohamed Salah has made Egypt and Africa proud. For the second time in his glittering career, he has made the final shortlist of the Best FIFA Awards. He now faces Argentina's icon Lionel Messi and Poland's Robert Lewandowski in the race to be crowned the best footballer on the planet as voted by football managers across the world.
After seeing Salah's ranking in France football to be the 7th, there were fears that he wouldn't make it in the best finalists. But many football managers across the world who have the right to vote confirmed that he is among their top 3 choices. His nomination thrilled all of Egypt, a country that once held massive celebrations. If a player made it to the top 100 players in the world, Salah is truly remarkable in that regard.
The world always wondered who would replace the dominance Messi and Ronaldo had over football. I'd have never imagined that an Egyptian player would be one of those, let alone that he's now the first name to lead as their career approaches its end. If Mohamed Salah continues with Liverpool, he will achieve much more. He has already proved himself as the most important player in the club's history.
Salah did not win any trophy with his English Premier League club Liverpool or Egypt in 2021. However, he completed another outstanding year where he broke records. Salah became Liverpool's UEFA Champions League top scorer of all time and the first to score in 10 consecutive matches. He also deposed Didier Drogba as the all-time English Premier League African top scorer. Yet compared to Messi and Lewandowski, he might not be the favorite to be crowned FIFA's best.
From a trophies perspective, Salah didn't do well. Messi won Copa America and the Spanish Cup with Barcelona before he moved to PSG. Lewandowski won the German league, the cup, and is the top scorer in the league. Salah's personal record is outstanding, though for years scoring more than 20 goals, he is the current top scorer in the Premier League. Team achievements usually give more weight to a player's chances to win.
Besides his first national team title with Argentina, Messi won his 7th Ballon d'Or in December, while Lewandowski broke the Bundesliga scoring record in a calendar year with 43 goals, breaking Gerd Muller's record of 42 goals set in 1972. Yet Salah's nomination remains a great achievement in itself. He's the only African so far to get nominated for the best since the establishment of the award in 2017. The winner of the 2021 award will be announced on the 17th of January. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
And turning to cricket, South Africa and India will go toe-to-toe in the final test of the 3-match series when the much-anticipated contest gets underway in Cape Town on Tuesday, with the sides tied at 1-1. The Proteas have a clean bill of health, while India will rely on returning captain Virat Kohli to claim the only prize they're yet to win, a Test series victory on South African soil. CGTN CS Du Plessis has more.
It has been a series that has seen a shift from India's dominance in Centurion to the resilient fight back by South Africa in Johannesburg. The scene is set for a ding-dong battle in the mother city of Cape Town, where a lot is at stake for both teams as the visitors hunt an elusive first Test series win on South African soil and the hosts aim to claim the series for themselves.
Yeah, I think this Test match is potentially the biggest we've had in 10 years, maybe even 15 years. And I think that speaks for its own respect. Test cricket's always going to have intensity. Me as a player, I bring the intensity as well. So I don't think it's going to lack intensity, let me put it that way. I think Test cricket still demands quite a high level of intensity, and you have to maintain that throughout 5 days.
Dean Elgar's charges look set to be unchanged for the match and will expect a fiery challenge from the visitors as their captain Virat Kohli returns, and they chase a first ever Test victory at the iconic Newlands ground, which should offer spinners a lot of assistance.
I think spin's going to play a much bigger role in Cape Town as it has in Pretoria and Joburg. So I know Kesh has had quite a quiet series by his standards, but I'm sure going forward into this Test match he's going to be licking his lips and hoping that he can get involved, and I'm sure Ravi Ashwin is also looking forward to the prospect of a bit of turn. So it's going to be a little bit different, but yeah, I think we'll, showing the way that we played in the last Test, we should be able to see it through. So hopefully we can win the series 2-1.
It's all to play for in Cape Town, all square at 1-1, and with the weather forecast perfect for cricket, it appears as if cricket fans are in for a real treat as two giants of world cricket collide in a do-or-die Test match that could well spell the end of a successful transition period for South Africa or potentially pave the way for a historic first for the men from the subcontinent. Only time will tell. CS Du Plessis, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
In tennis, the family of tennis world #1 Novak Djokovic said on Monday that truth and justice had won following the Serbian player's release from Australian immigration detention after winning a court challenge to remain in the country. The world tennis #1 was back in practice hours after winning a court challenge to remain in Australia, thanking the judge who released him from immigration detention and saying he remained focused on his bid for a record 21st Grand Slam win in Melbourne. The fight over his medical exemption from COVID-19 vaccination may not be over. However, as the Australian government said, it was still considering another move to deport him. A spokesman for Immigration Minister Alec Hawke said that he was considering using his personal power to again revoke Djokovic's visa.
Novak is free and he was at the tennis court a moment ago. He has had his training. He went to Australia to play tennis above all, to try and fight for himself and to play and try and win yet another Australian Open, and to win one more record that he has been chasing so attentively. He went to Australia with the best intentions. He provided all the possible documentation he was asked for, and in the end he obtained the medical exemption with which he went to Australia with. We have finally learnt the epilogue of all that.
Sichuan province is one of the many areas in China seeing an increase in enthusiasm for cold weather sport in the run-up to the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympics. And the Tian Tai Mountain Snow Park in Taizhou is giving local residents the chance to enjoy snow and ice activities close to home. Taizhou residents are not only heading to the venue for recreation, but also for professional development. That's because a number of local companies have started holding team-building efforts at the resort. And recent weekends have seen many parents take their children to learn about ice and snow sport like skiing. And since the opening of the Tian Tai Mountain Snow Park, the facility has received more than 100,000 visitors. And with China's Spring Festival approaching, the site is preparing to meet its peak passenger flow.
We are preparing for the Ice and Snow Carnival with the Zhejiang Provincial Sports Bureau. At that time, our residents will not only be able to ski on the international standard primary trails, but also take part in several entertainment activities, such as throwing snowballs and playing tug-of-war on the ice, which combine fun with competition, while also showing our passion for the Winter Olympics.
And we leave it there on this edition of Africa Live. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen, and do follow us on our digital media platforms. Thank you for watching. I'm Beatrice Marshall in Nairobi. Ramanyang is up next with Global Business. Bye-bye.